The hum of the engines was steady, a low vibration that lulled many into sleep. Seatbelts clicked, pillows were tucked beneath heads, and row 10 was no different, except for her. Her name was Claire Donovan, and she was sleeping soundly, her head tilted against the cold oval of the airplane window, a soft streak of sunlight brushing across her face. To anyone looking, she was just another passenger, tired, ordinary, traveling from New York to London like hundreds of others on the flight. No one knew who she really was, or the life she had lived just a few years before. The announcement came suddenly, breaking through the calm like glass shattering. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We have an urgent situation. If there are any combat pilots on board, please make yourself known to the crew immediately." The cabin fell silent. For a moment, people thought it was a joke, or maybe they'd misheard. But the tension in the captain's voice told another story. Heads turned. Passengers sat up straight. A ripple of unease moved down the aisles. And still, Claire slept in row 10. A man in a business suit across the aisle frowned. Did he just say combat pilots? He whispered. Combat pilots. A woman echoed, clutching her child's hand. The flight attendants, usually composed and smiling, were suddenly all movement, speaking quietly into radios, rushing toward the cockpit, then back down the aisles. Something was wrong. Everyone knew it. Row 10 was beginning to stir. A teenage boy in the middle seat nudged Claire's shoulder. "Miss. Hey, miss. They're asking for combat pilots." Claire stirred, blinking groggily. "What? The captain? He said they need a combat pilot. Do you fly planes?" She laughed softly, shaking her head. Not anymore. But her heart had already dropped into her stomach. Claire had spent a decade flying F-18s for the U.S. Navy. Callsign: Raven. She had been stationed on carriers, flown sorties overseas, and stared down enemy radar more times than she cared to count. She had quit 5 years ago, after losing her closest wingman in a mid-air collision. Since then, she had kept her past quiet, tucked away like an old uniform in a box in her attic. She wasn't supposed to be a pilot anymore. She was just Claire. Yet now, 30,000 feet above the Atlantic, fate was calling her back. The captain's voice came again, firmer this time, the kind of voice that told you there was no room left for hesitation. "This is an urgent request. We need a combat-trained pilot at the cockpit. Please identify yourself." Passengers looked around nervously. Murmurs grew louder. "What's happening? Why would they need that? Is the pilot sick?" Claire closed her eyes. She didn't want to stand. She didn't want anyone to know. But then she thought of the crew, the passengers, 300 souls in the air with no idea what was going on. She remembered what it felt like to be responsible for lives. That weight never left you. Slowly, she unbuckled her seatbelt and rose. "I'm here," she said quietly at first. Then louder. "I'm here. I'm a combat pilot." The entire cabin turned toward her. Shock rippled through the rows. She didn't look like what they expected. A slim woman in a simple gray sweater, hair tied back, no swagger, no uniform. But the way she carried herself told another story. The flight attendant nearest to her exhaled in visible relief. "Come with me, ma'am." Quickly. As she moved down the aisle, Claire heard whispers trail behind her. "She's a pilot. She doesn't look like one. God bless her." The cockpit door opened, and suddenly, she wasn't Claire Donovan, passenger in row 10, anymore. She was Raven again. Inside, the situation was worse than she imagined. The captain was pale, sweating, one hand gripping his chest. The first officer was panicked, trying to manage both the controls and the radio. "We've got a medical emergency," the first officer explained breathlessly. "Captain's having chest pains. He can't continue." Claire's gaze swept over the instruments, the altimeter, the horizon on the artificial display. Her instincts kicked in. "I've got it," she said firmly, sliding into the captain's seat. The first officer hesitated, eyes wide. "Wait. You really? Naval aviator. F-18 Hornets. Call me Raven. Now, tell me where we are." And just like that, the cockpit shifted. Back in the cabin, fear spread, but so did something else, hope. People whispered about the woman from row 10, about how she had just stepped forward like it was the most natural thing in the world. The teenage boy who had woken her up sat straighter, pride swelling in his chest. "That's her," he told his mother. "That's the woman I woke up." "God bless you," his mother whispered. For the next hour, Claire worked with the first officer, steadying the plane, plotting their course, coordinating with air traffic control. Every move she made was calm, deliberate. The years of training, the countless hours in simulators and skies, all came flooding back as though she had never left the cockpit. But there were complications. The weather over the Atlantic was worsening. Storm cells, turbulence, lightning flashing in the distance. The autopilot struggled to keep level. They had to divert. "Closest safe landing is Shannon, Ireland," the first officer said. "Good," Claire replied, adjusting the heading. "Let's get everyone home safe." In the cabin, turbulence tossed the plane, and people gasped, some prayed, some cried softly. A little girl in row 14 clutched her teddy bear. The mother whispered, "It's okay, sweetheart. The lady pilot's got us. She won't let anything happen." The girl squeezed her bear tighter, whispering, "The lady pilot's got us." Claire fought the storm, hands steady on the controls, eyes sharp. Memories surged. Carrier landings at night, the smell of jet fuel, the adrenaline of combat. But this was different. These weren't soldiers beside her. These were families, children, strangers who had placed their trust in her without even knowing her name. For the first time in years, she felt the purpose she thought she had lost. Not in war, not in missions, but in protecting lives. As the runway lights of Shannon Airport pierced through the sheets of rain, relief swept over the cockpit. "Flaps down. Landing gear set," Claire said calmly. The first officer nodded, his hands following hers, trusting her completely now. The wheels touched down with a roar, water spraying up around them, the plane rumbling but steady, steady all the way until it slowed to a safe crawl. A cheer erupted in the cabin, raw, grateful, emotional. Strangers hugged each other. Cheers flowed freely. Passengers clapped, not because of turbulence avoided, but because someone among them had stepped up when it mattered most. When Claire finally stepped out of the cockpit, she was met with applause that shook the fuselage. People reached out to touch her hand, to thank her, to simply look into her eyes. The teenage boy grinned wide. "Told you she was a pilot," he said proudly. Claire smiled, but only briefly. She didn't crave the spotlight. She only felt a quiet, steady warmth in her chest, a reminder that sometimes, the world still needed her. In row 10, her seat still waited, the blanket folded, the window showing a quiet drizzle outside. She sat back down, exhausted but at peace. For the first time in years, Claire closed her eyes, not to escape, but to rest, knowing she had done what she was meant to do.